Look, we always talk about the period of 3 months to bring about significant change, but after 3 or 4, 5, and 6, you're getting change after your first week, where you really notice significant changes somewhere between 4 and 6 weeks. We find, the thing that with Hugh is he basically works out about 4 times a week these days, with a high intensity combination of cardio and strength training. But let's not forget, when he's in a movie, it's more intense than that. We're going harder than that. We're doing double sessions. You've got to be very careful of overtraining and understanding what you're doing when you train. In terms of diet, he doesn't have a specific nutritionist, but we've employed some of the benefits that my wife Zoe has taught him over the years. To great effect. It's basically eating a lower carbohydrate, high protein, low fat style of diet. Replacing all fluids with water is one of the keys that we always talk about with diet. It's the one simple thing if you want to get results is replace all fluids with water and start drinking more water, and you'll be amazed at what difference you get.
What are some of the biohacking things that you would have alongside the training? Because biohacking and all of this longevity and vitality stuff started in the fitness industry. So I'm sure that you have some incredible things around sleep and, when you train, how often you train, and some of the recovery modalities that you recommend to Hugh and your other clients. What are some of the things that are really important that most people don't understand is part of achieving that kind of a look?
Yeah, I think you nailed it there. Look, one of the big things we talk about is sleep. You really need to understand the right amount of sleep and being consistent on your sleep patterns. We like to train early in the morning, like I'm talking somewhere between 5 and 5:30 in the morning. Look, that's not the optimal time for a body to train. It's a circadian rhythms as such that it's probably around 2:30 in the afternoon. But for consistency, and consistency is what gets results, we find that there's no excuses in the morning. One of the key things we always talk about is beating the alarm clock. Beating the alarm clock is a good sign that your body's in the right mental state to take on the day. So it's just a bit of a game that you play. It's about set the alarm clock, and your aim is to beat it without it going off. We're very big on training first thing in the morning because obviously there won't be very little things that can impact your day to stop you actually training. But consistency and variety is what gives results. And that's ultimately what and obviously intensity as well, consistency, variety, and intensity. And they're the key things we work on. With diet, it's not complicated. It isn't, like I said, you talked about biohacks, but if you just simply focus on replacing all fluids with water, maybe down to 1 coffee a day might be the only thing outside of that. I don't personally drink coffee, but I know Hugh does. That would be one thing that could be very beneficial.
One of the things that I've learned in my own fitness journey, I was the world's worst exerciser. I never did any until I was like in my mid-40s, is that variety definitely makes a big difference to compliance. Do you find that you have to kind of like change things up and where you train, how you train, what you train?
Yeah, it's one of the key things. Your body adapts to what you do, no matter what it is. And so having varieties is key to getting results. And variety is in the amount of weight you're lifting, in the reps you're lifting, in the style that you're lifting, in the combinations you're lifting. It's always evolving and changing. I always talk about if you're not measuring it, you're not managing it. So you should either be writing down or have putting it in your phone, and you should know what your numbers are. You don't get on for instance, a cardio piece of equipment and not understand what wattage you're riding at, what duration you've ridden at, what your heart rate went to. They're really important for you to understand. And it helps maintain consistency when you know what your numbers are, because you're constantly trying to you don't try and beat them on every single session. It's like building up to I suppose 100-meter sprinter. You do all types of effects to get you to the point where you run that race. So every day is not about absolutely smashing the best number out of the park. It's just about consistently changing what you do and picking the days where you really might go for it.
And what happens on the days where you just, you front up, they need to do training, whether it's Hugh Jackman or one of your other clients, and they really just don't want to? What do you do to push through those days?
I think it's just, I tend to find building from a small base on those points at times. Lowering the expectation is often a really great way to get those the results there. So start from a smaller base. Don't put the expectation to jump too high. And you find that as soon as your body starts to get into it, you'll be amazed how your mindset changes and everything else changes with it.
Going back to consistency and variety, what are some quick wins for, say, a person who used to maybe be an athlete in his teens and 20s, has let himself go because of life and getting busy, and is wanting to re-enter, and their first kind of priority is to lose fat, and then their second priority is to build a stronger, leaner body, and then maybe their final priority is to build muscle mass. What would be a good kind of, you were saying a 3 to 6 month is where you get to see the results. What could be a good kind of protocol that they could start with, middle, and finish with to kind of go in that path?
Look, the basic program I always start with is 20 minutes of cardio as my warm-up, no matter what. When I say my warm-up, it's a warm-up and it's an intensity, and it's always different. It's always either on a bike, it might be on a treadmill, it might be on a rower, it might be on a stand-up rower, it might be and it's different. Sometimes it's the slow build, starting at a low rate, getting up there till I'm only hitting maybe the 150 plus beats per minute in the last 2 minutes. Sometimes I get on a sprint from the start. Other times it's interval based. Otherwise it's 5 minutes on, 5 minutes off. It's always changing, but it's the fundamentals of how we work. Then from there, I always find one of the things that we haven't discussed yet is mobility. As we get older, we stiffen up. We start to become, and it's not just stretching, it's how mobile you are. Some of the best exercises for mobility is the squat, and the squat where you look at a child when they drop something on the floor and they squat down to their haunches, and we forget and tighten up in our bodies as we get older to the point where we just flex from the hips to pick up a piece of paper on the floor, and you wonder why you're pulling hamstrings and everything else, and you start to get tighter and tighter and tighter, and you start walking as stiff as anything. So choosing exercises that encourage mobility are really important. And like I said, there's very little that can compete with the squat to the fullest depth that you can go to. But again, you need to be careful and have good instruction, have good technique on how to do that properly. You can start with like a goblet squat, holding a kettlebell, but going all the way up to a back squat where you're adding Olympic plates onto that as well. So I'm all about big movements that work big muscle groups. But don't get me wrong, traditional training techniques with as much as functional training is important. Big movements like your bench press and your other movements that are sagittal based, I'm still a big fan of those as well, but it just always gets back to variety, and it's always changing it up. It's always, I often find the difference between doing 8 and 9 reps on a heavy weight, or 9 and 10 reps, is a lot, but the difference between doing 25 and 26 when you're at that point is almost insurmountable. It's actually almost mentally harder at that point. I wouldn't say it's not, but they're just as challenging, is what I'm trying to say.
What are some of the things that you think are youth markers in a man in his physique? And what are some of the things that specifically you can do to regain things like posture, a slim waist, a flatter tummy, strong arms?
And essentially you've got to understand your body fat, your composition. So, one of the things I use regularly with Hugh is a DEXA scan. It measures subcutaneous fat as well. You've got someone who might have like skinny arms and skinny legs, but around their stomach. So all around their internal organs, they're holding a lot of fat. And that's actually the dangerous fat that you really need to, and you see a lot of guys and they see in the mirror, their arms still look good, but that podgy stomach, and that's where that fat's building up. And again, it gets back to knowing your numbers, your diet. And it's one thing I would very much recommend to anyone who feels that happening, and you can see it straight away when your stomach's starting to push out, when you're losing that six-pack and you make an excuse for the fact that you're a little bit older. There should be no excuse. I think you look at Greg Norman on a lot of his shots that he loves posting, still presenting a six-pack at late 60s, I think it is. There is no reason in the world why that shouldn't be the norm. And just about getting that balance right of food and exercise. And it is important to acknowledge that food has a massive role, no matter how hard you train and how much cardio and weights that I've just discussed before. If you don't nail the food side of things, it doesn't work.
And what about supplements? Do you recommend your clients take supplements while they're training?
My wife's very, very big on the supplementation. To be honest, it's not that I'm not big on it. I just very much like to achieve it through eating the right foods. So look, I'm not the one to tell you what I think works as supplementation.
What do you take?
Well, no, the only thing I'll take is some protein powder. So I predominantly have that straight after training. And I'll occasionally take a pre-workout powder because I don't drink coffee. It's a synthetic coffee essentially. And I do find, I wouldn't suggest those as a, they're I do take them being upfront with you, but they're not something I say, you should do that. A lot of people just take a cup of coffee before they train, to be honest. I hear that happen on a regular basis. A lot of people need a cup of coffee as soon as they get out of bed. I get people more in tune with having, the first thing I do as soon as I wake up is I scoop 10 scoops of water from the tap into my body, because I know that's flushing out. Your body's been detoxifying for 8 hours, 7 hours overnight. You've got to flush it out. So the one thing I always say after beating the alarm clock is go to the bathroom, even if you don't have a glass there, scoop 10 scoops of water straight into your body as quickly as you can as soon as you wake up. Flush your body as soon as you get there.
Let's talk about our favorite Australian man, Hugh Jackman again. So we find ourselves in lockdown at the moment. I know that he's in town and you'll be working with him. Are there some exercises that you give him to do while he is in lockdown if you can't be training with him, or when he's, traveling around the world doing a movie launch and there's not a lot of time for training, but he might be in a hotel room or have limited access? But you consider these essential exercises that anyone can do, and they're amazingly beneficial.
Oh, look, it just gets back to, like I said before, you can do a squat in a bedroom, wherever you are. It's probably the biggest engagement of muscles in one movement that you can do, and you can pick up a small object and hold it in front of you. It's the one thing that you do if you're in a hotel room. Obviously, you can do all the other things from presses and dips and other things, but Hughes often carries around the bands. The elastic bands are extremely useful these days, the way that they've got them in different weights and tensions and handles and other things. There's so much you can do, hanging them on doors and other things and straps like that.